All right, everything is in order. Now, when I came back from my break, and I had a chance to network and do some photo shots and all of that, and then I walked up to this one person and I said, "You look familiar. Have I met you since I've been here?" And he pointed to the slide. He said, "That's me." I said, "Oh, now I know why I know you. I got your bio, and it has a picture on it." So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Rob Ridham. Now, you need to correct on your agenda because it's R-E-A-R, and I think you got a B in your paper. He is the Director of Corrections for the Lafayette Parish Sheriff's Office. He has a master's degree in management and a double major in criminal justice and sociology. He is certified by the American Correctional Association as a correctional executive. He brings significant diversity to this position. Now, everybody say diversity. That word, I usually single out something important about the speaker in their bio or in their presentation, but diversity, everything we've heard, especially from Rick Covington's presentation, where he showed us the levels of risk factors. And then when the speaker just before him shared with us the three levels of the community issues, family, father issues, and then what was the other one? Behavioral issues. Well, those are diversified issues. And then from the last presentation, we learned about all the different risk factors. And then under the risk factors, you learned about the principles that are there. And then beneath all of those principles, you learned about the programs that address those principles. And then beyond that, we learned about I didn't know they had reentry centers. And then what was that other one? Day reporting centers. Wow. So you see why we're doing what? Giving everybody a great big applause. I'm just getting you ready for the next speaker, okay? All right. So the reason Rob's highlight for me about diversity is because, now check this out, of everything, I told you what he's doing now, but prior to that, the reason his bio says that he brings significant diversity to this position, he was the transition, everybody say transition commander for the construction of a large high-rise jail in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Now, see, the reason we salute that is because we know the person, and he's right here in Louisiana, who did that in Minnesota, okay? So we're not applauding that he had to do this high-rise jail, but the fact that he did, and he's now with us, and you can imagine a large high-rise jail, and he was the transition commander for that. He also worked in a juvenile center, a work release center, and a correctional center. All of what you saw on the previous presentation. Over the course of his career, he's had the opportunity to visit over 50 jails and prisons across the United States. He has had years of training in the classification and accreditation. Accreditation disciplines associated with the National Institute of Corrections and American Correctional Association. Disciplines is another key word. So the two key words that we're going to hear this speaker fill out for us, just imagine that in the middle of the circle of his presentation, you're listening for the diversity, and you're listening for diversity as it relates to disciplines, two key words. And right now, he represents the National Institute of Corrections Southern Regional Training Initiative as a regional field coordinator. Here we have Rob Ridham. Give him an applause.
Thanks. Thanks for having me here today, this morning, actually. This is going to be kind of a weird situation for me because I'm a walker and a talker, and so being behind a microphone is, this will be odd. All right, so kind of bear with me. I'm also a fast talker, and so we'll get through that. Feel free to ask questions as we go through the slides. We can go to the first one right here. Next. These are things that we're going to talk about, the jail count as it relates to Lafayette Parish and kind of the problem that we were in when I took over the jail now almost 14 years ago, working with the judiciary, development of assessment instruments. I think Rhett was actually talking specifically about that. I'll talk a little bit more. The development of alternatives to our incarceration, the various programs that we have specifically, dealing with the media, and ultimately, one of the biggest things as it relates to budgets and the general perception of corrections is now how much it's costing. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because that's an important issue. Next. And so just a little background, the Sheriff's Office in Lafayette Parish has 800 employees. Within my division, we have 500 employees. 200 of those are actually in the downtown jail. The rest of them are actually at other locations, which I'll talk about in a minute. On a daily basis, I manage about 1,300 offenders. Next. These are the different types of accreditations that we have. Which just kind of speaks to what we do as an organization. We have all these different accrediting agencies come in and actually look at our agency and determine what is the best practice and making sure that we actually meet those guidelines as a system. Specifically for the jail, we are ACA accredited, NCCHC accredited, Correctional Training Academy accredited, CARF accredited. And we're the only jail in the state of Louisiana that's CARF accredited. And the reason for that is that we can actually bill for Medicaid, bill through Magellan with the CARF accreditation. It is a long, in-depth process, though, I got to be honest with you. But the benefits significantly outweigh the issues. We are also the only licensed drug treatment facility in the state of Louisiana as a sheriff's office. Next. Next. There you go. All right, and so these are the different various facilities that we operate out of. We have the downtown jail. We have our transitional housing facility. By the way, this is all on the internet. If you go to the website, LafayetteParishSheriffs.com, .com, LafayetteSheriff.com. It's on the internet. So I see people taking pictures unless you just want to get a picture of me, which is kind of weird. And so we have the Community Corrections Campus, and I'll talk, I'm going to kind of highlight all these, Inmate Industries, Acadia Recovery Center, and our Youth Opportunity Center, because much like I think Waylon was talking about, Sheriff Newstrom's ideology, and I agree fully with this, is that we have to make a difference in getting to kids before they come into the system. And so we've actually started, just within the last couple of years, a Youth Opportunity Center and a Juvenile Assessment Center. I'm not really going to go into that a whole lot because I'm here to talk about reentry, but for us it's a whole systemic ideology of managing people before they come into the criminal justice system, and then as they're in the system, and then as they go out of the system. Okay, next. All right, and so these are the various programs that we have. Work release, alternative sentencing program, and I'll get really into specifics with that. The same thing with reentry. The Acadiana Recovery Center, and I'll get into that. Some of the stuff I'm not going to talk about is the high set. We have our own teachers, we have our own instructors, both inside the jail and at our correctional campus. We do Thinking for a Change, much like Rhett was talking about. It's a great program. You can get it off the NIC. It doesn't cost you anything. We do also cognitive behavioral therapy, which is actually taught by licensed instructors. We have Teen Intervene, which is a juvenile program for at-risk youth. Milestones, which is a drug treatment program taught by licensed drug treatment facilitators. Check and Connect is another program where we go, I have counselors that go into the schools and actually interact with the kids at the schools. We also have family functional therapy. And the reason I'm kind of going over these, I'm not going to talk about these in any sort of significant detail. But family functional therapy is a great program, once again, where it's directed specifically towards juveniles, where my licensed counselors go into the people's homes and address the issues that the family has as a systemic standpoint versus bringing them into our environment, okay? And I'll be going through the rest of those. So we can go on to the next one. Wow, that looks weird. Okay, and so when I came to the, I'm from Minnesota, and I don't really like the cold weather. And one of the biggest mistakes that I've made was actually not moving closer to the equator. So I should have done that because it's still too cold here right now. Okay, and so I came here 13 years ago, and one of the first things I did was we were operating the downtown jail at that point. And it was about a 650-bed facility. But we were having huge problems with increasing population. And I was looking at the stats just for the last couple of years. And so I did a regression analysis and a projection analysis, and we were increasing by 32% with our sentence population every year, 32% in 2001. And 47% for unsentenced population. And so I went and talked to the sheriff and I said, we got a problem. We only have so many beds. Our jail, our downtown jail, is originally designed for 338 inmates. At that point, we had 650 in it. Today, right now, we have 950 in it, okay? So we had a problem, so we had to look at different alternatives at that point. Okay, next. And so this is just to kind of, and I'll go back to this slide at the end. This is our expenses for my various departments. And so the first one, the biggest one, is jailing. Jailing costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money. You need it. You need to have jails. I'm not suggesting that you don't have jails, but our cost for jailing significantly outweighs any of the other expenses that we have in our particular division. And the reason that this is important for everybody to understand, and this is my attempt to kind of educate everybody, I do this talk all across the state and all across the region, is that jailing costs a lot of money. And I don't think people really understand. For us, our cost per day is $54 a day per inmate. That's a lot of money. And I can do it for significantly less in all these other programs. Next. Oh, that one didn't come across. So that's just basically a breakdown of the overall cost of the jail. Our jail, the sheriff's office pays $15 million towards its operation. I'm also a budget head manager for LCG, which is a really weird situation because I actually manage their budget too. And their budget is $4 million, so in all actuality, the budget for the jail costs $19 million. Once again, going back to that, it's significantly high cost. And that's true in every jail. Some of you are from around the state, obviously, not just in Baton Rouge area. Every jail costs a lot of money. Next. And if anybody has any questions during this process, please raise your hand, okay? And so this is what I've been able to do just in the last couple of years is actually start looking at developing revenue streams. And this really kind of, a lot of people are real interested in this, right? Because ultimately they're like, well, I just want to throw people away. I just want to lock people up and throw away the key. But that doesn't work because almost all of them are getting released. And so ultimately what we have to do is talk really about budgets. We have to talk about recidivism levels. And I'll show you a couple of slides from studies that we've actually done relative to that too. But because we've been able to bill through Magellan for certain functions that we're providing in the community, we've been able actually pretty successfully to generate some revenue. We have actually been selected just recently as one of the reentry portals for the state of Louisiana, and so our revenue as a function of that is going to increase too. All right. So basically, we've been able to generate $6.5 million towards the purpose of managing this overall population. Next. Now this slide right here is I show this a lot, especially in our community, and this is something that any agency can develop. It talks about how much every single program costs. And so you want to get down to the actual cost per program to make sure that you're doing it effectively and efficiently, right? I think Rhett was talking about evidence-based practices. Well, there's a cost to that, okay? These programs aren't free, but ultimately they're still cheaper than housing people inside jails and prisons. And so for the jail, it's $54 a day. For my treatment programs where I have licensed mental health counselors, my cost is $33 a day, which is still less than $54, and my success rate is significantly higher than just placing them in jail. For work release, I actually make $11 every day per inmate, which goes towards paying for some of my other programming. And then housing them in my day reporting program, we call it alternative sentencing program, my cost for that is $21 a day, which is still significantly less than housing them in jail. All right, next. And so corrections is a growth industry. This graph, the high one up there is all the people on probation across the country, and then you see increases in prisons and jail. We'll go to the next one. Next, there you go. Interestingly enough, though, as that arc kind of comes about, the crime rate's actually technically going down. The crime rate's going down in the state of Louisiana too, whether or not people realize that or not. And so this is an education thing. We're actually dealing with crime rates that are the same or comparable crime rates as back in the 1970s. But if you asked the general public person, I mean, I can't even remember the 1970s, I was 9, 10. But if you ask the general person, you would think, it's Beirut outside, right? And so what we have to do as a community, we've been talking a lot about community, is we have to educate people and make them aware that crime rates aren't necessarily, they're not out of control. They're actually going back, and this is stuff off the UCRs, right? Okay, next. Next, there you go. And if you look at the victimization rate, crime rate, it's actually significantly less, all right? UCRs, there's all sorts of, if you do research into that, I do a lot of research, like a voracious reader. UCRs, the information put into UCRs, there's all sorts of problems with that. The victimization rate, as established by the National Crime Victimization Survey, is significantly more accurate at the depiction of how crime is actually going. And so I just wanted to show that to demonstrate that, and this is longitudinal, it goes out to 2005, I think. The victimization rate is actually less, significantly less than it even was in the 1990s. Next. And you got expenditure by discipline, you got police, corrections going through the roof, and judicial, right? And that's costing a lot of money. And what's that impacting? Anybody want to take a guess? Where do they take money away from generally? Social services. That's right, that's an easy target. Social services and education, okay? So unfortunately, what ends up happening is that if they take away from education, we're creating a better funnel for criminals, right? And that's the unfortunate portion of it. All right, next. And so I found this one, and this was real interesting, and this is actually what I did my thesis on when I was going to graduate school, the institutionalization or the deinstitutionalization of mentally ill people. And I see a couple of corrections people out there. the mentally ill population in jails and prisons is going out of control. Okay? It is unbelievable. And so this graph right here depicts that, where the institutionalization back in the 1970s, we used to have 540,000 mentally ill beds. Now we're down to 40,000 across the country. But unfortunately, as you can see, we've basically just placed a lot of those people in jails and prisons. Now the problem with that, I mean, there's all sorts of problems with that, but one of the biggest problems is that people say, well, and I've heard this number, I've heard, well, the mentally ill population is equating to about 30% of people in jails and prisons. It's about 30% of all the people entering jails and prisons. I think that is so far underestimated, and the reason for that is that in a lot of jails and prisons, they don't have licensed mental health workers to actually do that assessment, right? I have 5 in our jail specifically. I have 5 licensed LPC or social workers in my jail. I have multiple others in all other sorts of programs, but the volume of mentally ill people entering jails and prisons is astronomical. I think it's much more towards the 50% rate than it is the 30% rate. Anyway, next. All right, and so we got today how incarceration is kind of going up, and there's another corollary graph to this where it says if we don't do something about it, we don't change the system, we're not going to actually have a decline until 2100. I'll be dead by then. Next. And so this is a snapshot of the entire country. 12 million admissions come through jails annually. Okay, those are 9 million unique individuals. Just shy of 800,000 people locked up in jails every day. 81% of those people released in 1 month, and 62% have not been convicted of a crime. And so they're in pretrial status, and basically they're in chaos. All those people that are in pretrial status, they don't know what's going on. I'd much rather have 50 sentenced people to 1 pretrial person, because a sentenced person knows what they're dealing with. A pretrial person is in chaos. Their life is in disorder. It's hugely problematic. Next. And so, I'm going to go to the next one. All right. I think Waylon was talking about almost every single inmate in a jail is getting released. Either they're going to prison or they're getting released to the street. 97% of all the people in jails and prisons are going back to the community. And this is something every year. One of the speakers was talking about those individuals getting sent to other jails. Every year, I'm sending 500 citizens of Lafayette Parish that were born, raised, educated to whatever degree, committed a crime, found guilty, sentenced to DOC time. I'm sending them to other local parish jails around the state because I don't have the space. But those individuals are sitting up there, whatever program they're getting, I can only hope they're getting, and then they're coming back. But they've lost that reunification with the family. They've lost that connection, and ultimately they're going to fail. That's the reality of it. And so we have to, as a system, do a much better job at keeping these people local. And that's why I applaud the efforts of the Department of Corrections in creating these regional sites versus actually sending them all across the state, because that's just going to fail. All right, next. Yeah, we go to the next one because we're short on time. I got 8 minutes. In 3 weeks, jails have contact with more people as prisons do in 1 entire year. 3 weeks. And so what we really need to do is start focusing on the jails and how they're being ran and develop reentry processes for those individuals. For us, reentry starts in intake, much like I think Jenny was talking about. Ours does too, but some of these people are only going to be here for 24 hours. So we're still setting them up as much as we can, providing them as much as we can, even if it's just packets of information, right? Next. All right, there's 3,365 jails across the country. It's kind of like herding cats. So next. This is real interesting to me, and I actually teach a class at UL. Approximately 2 out of 3 people released from prison in the United States were rearrested within 3 years. That's 66%. We're doing a terrible job at reentry. We need to do a much better job. Next. This is another one here. 3/4 of them returning home have a history of substance abuse, okay? But we're only providing treatment to about 14% of those people. And when I mean treatment, I mean treatment. And I'm not diminishing AA or NA. Those are fine programs, but those are not treatment. When they talk about thinking for a change or cognitive behavioral therapy, we need to teach those types of classes to get them to analytically think about what they're doing as an individual. Next. All right, and so we talked. Louisiana's number one, yay, yes. Unfortunately, you know, we're number one by a lot. Okay. What this chart is the Pew thing, the Pew report. It was done in 2010. 1 out of every 57 people in the state of Louisiana is incarcerated. 1 out of every 57. Okay? For the country, it's 1 out of 100. If you're an African American male, it's 1 out of every 9 in the state of Louisiana. That's terrible. We need to do a much better job. All right? Next. And so, again, we're number one. Yeah, yes, we got a great graph there. Next. 846 out of every 100,000 people in the state of Louisiana are behind bars. Next. Okay, and so we book about 13,000 people a year. Again, just like the national statistics, about half are released every day. 60% are arrested for misdemeanors. Most jails are spending a lot of money on misdemeanor offenses. Our booking cost is $100 a day. For every single person coming through the jail, it's $100, okay? Our average stay is 13 days. That is disproportionate, I'll be honest with you, because if 50% of our inmate population is leaving within 24 hours, I actually have a whole group of individuals that are there for several months, okay? And again, daily I manage about 1,300 offenders, but only about 950 of them in a secure facility. Next. And we talked about this before, but this is really important. Just you want to look at what you're doing projection-wise, especially in your cities, in your populations. If your city is growing, I'm not saying crime is going to grow, but ultimately, if you have more people in your city, Lafayette, I think, is the fastest growing city in the state of Louisiana. That had a designation last year. The more people you have, you're going to have more crime. And I'm not saying we're bringing bad people into Lafayette. What I'm saying is just a percentage of the overall number of people there, all right? So you want to take these stuff into consideration. And we can go on to the next one. And so developing relationships. When I first came here, I did this study, and so the first thing I did was went and talked to the sheriff and said, we got a problem. The next thing I did, I went and talked to the judges, and I said, look, we got a problem. What do you think about diversion? What do you think about me opening up our own pretrial program where we assess people and we release people from the front gate and sentence people? And I had several meetings with these individuals. Again, it was kind of like herding cats for any of the judges. Hey, it's a judge in the room. But actually, they were very open to that. And after bringing all the data to them, you just can't go to people without data. You have to have the appropriate information, and that's why I do these talks. You have to have the information. You can't have it. You can't be anecdotal. And so I brought the information to the judges, and I said, look, if we continue on this path, I'm not going to be able to take people because the fire marshal's coming down on me and saying that I can only have so many people in my jail. At which point, they're standing outside waiting to come in. And so they were actually open to this process, but I had a lot of meetings with the judges, a lot of meetings. Next. And so I developed a STOP program, Sheriff's Tracking Offender Program. And so I have six staff specifically assigned to do assessments on people as they come into the jail. And they determine whether or not they can be diverted out of the system, right at the front gate. Next. And so, that didn't come across, or did it? Yeah, it did. So basically, since 2005, we've assessed 26,000 people, and we've released almost 5,000 people into various programs, either in pretrial or sentence status. Okay, next. And so these are the different types of diversion. We have adult day reporting. We have GPS monitoring, transitional work. We also have a drug rehab program where we place them into a drug rehab program for 6 months. The first 28 days, they actually get an intensive drug program, licensed drug treatment, just like you would in the outside. We also take volunteers, by the way, because our belief is that if you want to get treatment, you should, because hopefully you won't come to jail. And after that first 28 days, then we get them a job. We reunify them with their family members. We teach them life skills. We give them HiSET, GED, cognitive behavioral therapy, anything that we can. When we're going through the assessment process, through the STOP process, next slide, please. Next slide. We assess the crap out of them. We assess them like there's no tomorrow. And so we assess them with the Kentucky pretrial release assessments. It's called the CAPERS. We give the proxy risk. That was some of the stuff that Rhett was talking about as far as dynamic versus static. The proxy is free, by the way. TCU drug screen is also free. Criminal thinking scale is also free. CAPERS is not free. GAIN, global appraisal of individual needs, is a screening that actually gives you a recommendation for case management. Eureka and the motivation for change is to determine where they're at mentally from how much they are invested in this whole change process. So we assess the crap out of people. I mean, and I'm sure they're getting sick of it, but we have to know where they are from a baseline perspective to be able to place them into the appropriate program. We also do the tape. Interestingly enough, 50% of our inmate population cannot read at a 5th grade level. 50%. That's terrible. Next. And so ultimately, based off of this assessment, and I think Rhett was talking about high, low, 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 puts us into various parameters based off of their individual needs. Again, it's not a cookie cutter. This is designed individually for them, based off their situation, their charges, their issues within the community. Next. And so they can ultimately go out to our ASP program, which is at a community corrections campus. We've had a lot of visitors out to this location, and if anybody wants to come, they can contact me, and I'll have my people tour you around. Fortunately enough for us, we were able to purchase an old school from the school system, and that's this location. And so at our adult day reporting center, next. It's a non-residential alternative for pretrial and sentenced individuals. Right now we have about 155 individuals in the program every day. And ultimately, since we started in 2001, and I know I talked about budgets and staff, I got 200 people in the jail and I have 300 people outside the jail, right? I started with one outside the jail. One. So it starts with one. All you need is one person. And what you start doing is identifying gaps, identifying needs, identifying relationships, and it just kind of grows from there. Identifying funding sources, which is real important. Funding sources, okay? Next. And so basically, the people in day reporting, they come every day, Monday through Friday. It's just like school. And they show up at 8 o'clock and they have classes. They have GED classes, they have anger management classes, moral recognition classes. And again, it's dependent upon their individual need what classes they have to attend. They can be there until 8 o'clock at night. And we have different people teaching different classes, so it's just a function of figuring out what slot they need to be placed into. Okay? One of the more interesting things that we do, and Rhett did specifically talk about this, these people can't plan, right? And so what we did is we developed an itinerary where they have to plan out their lives. And they have to plan a week and ahead. And that week of itineraries is approved. And then from there, we call them. And sometimes we show up at their doorstep and make sure, or wherever they're supposed to be, we show up. And if they're not there, that's a problem, obviously. That would result in a sanction. Next. And so these are the different types of programs that we have: job training, GED, community building, life skills, addiction treatment. Next. That's just a picture of the classroom. Next. GPS offender tracking. We have a bracelet system because, again, it's all about having different alternatives. We have a whole bunch of people going through this program, saving us at the agency a lot of money. For us, our cost is $5.50 for this. I charge the inmates $6. I'm making 50 cents. Okay? Next. But to place them into jail, it costs the taxpayers $54. We have our own drug lab. Next. And this was kind of a neat little deal. I can't recommend it highly enough to anybody, unless you're in Lafayette. Don't do this, because that's me over there. I got it. All right. But if you have the system, we're doing about 500 drug screens every week, and it was costing us $72,000 a year to do drug screening annually. This year, I'm going to make about $150,000. All right? And so it's about having that business mentality, too, in some of these concepts. Next. They talked about the regionalization. We're the purple one. Yeah, yes. Next. And so this is our reentry program. And so I have my reentry program. We were selected as one of the portals, right? And so how our reentry program works is I start them in the jail with cognitive behavioral therapy or thinking for a change. They go to that for about 4 weeks. And then based off of their charges, I transition them out to the campus. And this is somebody said, I don't remember who it was, one of the speakers talked about the fishbowl effect, right? Being in a jail and you can't screw up, or you shouldn't screw up. Well, we've kind of modified that because I actually talked to the inmates, and being in a jail, you can't learn anything. It's difficult to learn because you're worried about somebody stealing your stuff, or getting stabbed, or getting beat up, or worrying about how the deputy's talking to you, or worrying about what's, not seeing the sun for some people, right? And so what we did is every day, for this group of individuals, after their first month of thinking for a change, they come out of the jail, and they're bused every day to this school, and it's a campus environment where they can learn, and they're not all handcuffed, and they're not all hooked up or whatever. I've been operating this for 4 years. If I wish I had some wood. To this day, I've only had one walk-off. I've had one. And he returned about an hour later. I still put him back in the jail. But I've only had one. I wish I had some wood to knock on. But it works. What they've done is they've developed a community within themselves. It's one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen. And so they go to class every day. They get bussed out to this school. The school does not have, it's not gun towers or anything like that. They could jump the fence at any moment if they wanted to, but they don't. because they know that they're getting assistance and help. And that's what they want. And so they go out there every day at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and they get done at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I bring them back on a bus. Next. Nope. It's a school bus. Just like a regular school bus. Huh? Right now I have about 80 in the program. And so these are just the program, the different things that we actually provide in reentry. We do a whole bunch of different stuff. And again, it's not shotgun approach. It's tailored to the individual. We have caseworkers. Some of the things that we are doing as a function of thanking the DOC for this and the funding that they're giving us, we're going to start a welding class here in the near future. So to actually give them additional vocational skills. Next. And so, you know what that says. Basically, we've basically had about 400 successful people go through the program since we started. We have just recently amped up our program here in the last couple of months because of the DOC. So again, thanks to them. Next. After what this talks about is a continuum of care. We actually are a perfect individual for us is an individual that is an inmate worker, and I have about 125 of those people that go out on the streets every day and clean up the parish. Every day. I have 25 different deputy crews. If you go into Lafayette Parish and you haven't seen an inmate crew cleaning up Monday through Friday out on the streets, you're not looking. All right? I got 125 inmates, 25 deputy staff supervising all those inmates, and those inmates are the perfect candidates to go into reentry. And because it's all about step downs and incentives. And so from there, from reentry, they go into work release. And hopefully even from there, if I can work out an agreement with the DOC, I would place them on a bracelet and push them into day reporting, ultimately. That would be the ideal. Because we end up managing these people anyway back in society. And the criminal, the CID people in enforcement end up dealing with them on the other side. And so we want to collect as much information, positive and negative, on these people as we can while we're dealing with them. Next. That's our transitional work program. We got 100 next. We have 192 beds. It's just like any other work program, with the exception we have females too. I think we're only one of two in the entire state. I believe in parity. Next. So I'm running against. Transitional work can be up to 3 years. Well, in the reentry program, they can be in the reentry program for 18 months prior to going to work release. So they could be there, after their first month, they could be there 15, 16 months getting programming, depending upon their specific need. Yes, sir. Yep. They work, we have 192 beds. Right now, my census is down a little bit. I probably only have about 160 inmates in work release right now today that are actually out there working in the community. Next. This just talks about the money that we're generating. Next. But again, it's important to gather this information. Next. To be able to talk to stakeholders and taxpayers and citizens about what the expenses and what the costs are. That's just kind of a description of our transitional housing facility. Next. ARC. Last year, I'm no real short on time. Last year, we took over the Acadiana Recovery Center from Lafayette Consolidated Government. And Acadiana Recovery Center is a 22-bed drug treatment facility. Drug treatment with licensed drug addiction counselors. It's a 28-day program, 22 beds. We have inmates that go into this program. We have free people that go into this program. We have volunteers that go into this program. This year, we're real aggressive at managing this budget, and last year LCG made right around $750,000. This year we're going to make about $1.4 million. No medical detox because that's a higher level of care. Next. And so this just talks about it. We operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. Next. These are the different types of programs that we have for that. And again, going back to this whole stop in the jail determines whether or not you'll go to this program. Stop in the jail will determine if you go to work release. Stop in the jail will determine if you go to reentry. Stop in the jail will determine if you go to alternative sentencing. All right, next. And so we have outside of the jail, outside of the 5 social workers and LPCs in the jail, I'm going to say close to 10 other licensed people outside the facility that I'm receiving funding for through Magellan to provide services to the public and the inmate population under my supervision as long as they aren't physically incarcerated. Okay? That's just what this talks about. And so this transition back into society is real important. I think Rhett was talking about it. Getting into see a behavioral health, mental health counselor at some of the Department of Health and Hospitals, if anybody's, it takes a long time. And there's a huge disconnect, and it's difficult for those individuals that are dealing with mental illness if they're released on a Tuesday and they have an appointment 6 weeks from that Tuesday to make it. They're not showing up. And so what we do is we provide that bridge, we provide that gap. Next. This talks more about the addiction treatment. Next. We'll race through the rest of these, I think. Next. We have you can go on to the next one too. So I talked about our rehab, right? Our rehab, again, is a 6-month program. And I'm fascinated by how many people actually volunteer for that. They're basically housed in our community program house, but their activity is very restricted. They're not going out to eat anywhere. They have to remain in the house unless they're at treatment and or their job. But we have people that volunteer, and so my point with that is that they want the assistance. For our rehab and for our ASP, for example, actually ASP and rehab, there's only a $50 administrative fee. And that's the only cost, except a $10 drug screen weekly after that. So it's very affordable. And so for example, rehab, for a 6-month program, we looked in the community, and it was near, the cheapest one we could find was $1,700. Next. And these people don't have $1,700. If they did, they wouldn't need us. And so we have group treatment. That's what this is. All sorts of different things. Next. This just talks about the actual numbers that we're dealing with. Interestingly enough, and I talked about this initially, our assessments dealing with critical issues in the jail, specifically with mentally ill people, is skyrocketing. Last year we had over 2,000 incidences. 2,000. It's way too many. Next. I talked about rehab. Next. This just kind of talks about our natural progression of graduates, and we're getting more and more graduates because we're getting more and more people. Next. Same thing here, and this actually talks about our waiting list. Unfortunately, a lot of the not-for-profit agencies in Lafayette have actually shut down because they haven't been able to kind of meander through the Magellan process. And as a result of that, our waiting list is significantly large. And that's what that is. Next. You can just see we're having more and more people in our programs and our revenue. This year, outside of rehab, like I said, ARC is going to actually generate $1.5 million. So that's in addition to that $638,000. Next. Working with the media. We're almost done. I have an open door policy with the media. It's really a strange situation to hear from the Director of Corrections. The media people have my cell phone. They call me all the time. You have to have, and I want to have that relationship with them because I want them to call me first so that I can tell them what happened versus them hearing it some other way. And I also figure that I have to have 5 positive stories because I know some negative story is coming. I know it. I've been operating in a jail, or I've been working in a jail for 26 years. Something bad is going to happen. And so I know that I have to have 5 positive stories, so you have to, in your system, whatever the system that is, you have to open up and deal with the media and deal with it proactively. Because if you don't, it's going to come back on you. Okay? Next. I think we're almost done. Okay, last couple of slides. This talks about the recidivism level, and they talked about this here. And I was just actually informed about this just last week, as a matter of fact. We did a 5-year study. I had thought originally it was a 3-year study. So we had done a 5-year study of recidivism on all of our programs. Generally, you only do a 3. And we did straight recidivism, which means if they got arrested anywhere for whatever reason, for any length of time, we considered that a failure. And so we looked at all the databases across the country and as much as we could. And our recidivism rate was right around 32% versus 65%, which is incredible. Okay? And so I show this slide to a lot of the people in the community, and because this is saving money. This is successes. Next. And then I pretty much end with this one versus the cost for a program versus incarceration. You have to have the stats. You have to have that information. You have to have it available. You have to be prepared. You have to be able to talk about what the problems are. All right, next. Any questions? Ooh, all sorts of hands. What we do, well, our fees, like I said, our administrative fees are only $50. Our drug screening is $10 a week, okay? Most of the inmates have that. Most of the individuals have that, and we have free people, actually. We're actually dealing also with the school system and testing their kids, too, by the way, with their parents' approval, obviously. But if we have somebody that doesn't have the money, it doesn't happen very frequently, we allow them to work community service hours. Doing great. Well, I think it's actually, Waylon talked about it, and the incarceration rate is technically actually dropping. It is, believe it or not. It just seems very disproportionate as a nation that we are so far ahead of everybody else. And so, and this is just my opinion, but I think, it's the systemic issue of education, socioeconomics, the way the court system works here, I'm from Minnesota. We had, when I left, we had the lowest incarceration rate in the world, in the country at that point. And, but misdemeanors, if a misdemeanor got arrested, they would go to court the next day and plead out. Here in Louisiana, it's 45 days before those charges are picked up. That's, you know, if I'm indigent and I can't afford bail, that's, my life is, I'm in trouble. And I'm going to lose my house or my apartment, my job, my, you know, I think those are the types of things. Because again, we're talking, and somebody talked about the entry into the system. I mean, most people, not all, but most people aren't going out and doing significantly violent offenses their first get-go. They're doing very small types of misdemeanor offenses that ultimately involve them in the criminal justice system, but ultimately there's not a lot of immediate consequences. And I got a 6-year-old, and if I told her, hey, I told you not to do that, and now 45 days later, I'm going to decide whether or not I'm going to punish you or not, she would say, whatever, right? And there's the very similar mentality relative to the inmate population. There's no cause effect. I mean, if I'm sitting in jail for 45 days, I'm just getting mad and angry about it. Yep. Yes. Yep. We allow it, but it's very convoluted. It's a very difficult process to traverse. So if it's in our inmate handbook, and if they want to flow through the process, we allow it. Yes, ma'am. I think with the mandatory minimums that there is a big problem there, quite honestly, and again, that's just my opinion, with the discretion allowed to the judges, because there's all sorts of different things that come into making a decision on an individual case. And if you look at California, and I'm following a lot of their stuff pretty closely, you know, they're actually closing the state prisons because of federal court decree, and we don't want that here. By the way, that would be a terrible situation for us, and pushing those individuals back on the local counties. We're essentially, we've kind of already done that, because I mean, I can hold a DOC person for a long period of time. Fortunately for us, we've been set up in a situation where we can actually provide programming. There's unfortunately a lot of jails that don't have that capacity like we've been able to set up over here. Well, I only have 900 that are actually physically in the jail. Out of the pre-trial population of the 900, I have about 600. Some of them. I operate a pretrial program for work release also, and I also send parish inmates to my work release program. And so it's kind of, my manager of my work release program doesn't like it, but he's not the boss of me. And so, a perfect case for me is an individual that has a bond, is in a pretrial status. I send to work release, we get them a job, and they bond out. I mean, that's, for us, he hates it because it's a big pain in his behind, but again, he's not the boss of me, so. Well, they have to agree. They have to agree with it, and then we, again, working the relationship with the judges, we have them sign what's called a stop bond. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's on the website. Maybe not in that specific. I do a lot of these, and so it's this one I just changed this morning. So that one specifically isn't, but it's very near. And I'm getting the I got to go call on the back. Thank you. It's been great.
Come get your, oh, watch that pen. You slip and fall. Okay. Even though he was talking about what? The two primary institutions we're focused on are called and a jail or a prison, right? So your focus was the only one that was totally on jails, yes, right? But all of the programs that they are doing in the jail, we hope to transition them into the what? Into the prisons. Okay, so thank you for giving us that presentation today.